You know, I noticed something curious while walking through the streets this morning. I saw a man in a luxurious car stuck in traffic, and his face was tense, strained, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 invisible mountains. And then I saw a child playing with a simple cardboard box, turning it into a castle, a ship, an entire world. And his face radiated something that man had lost long ago. It made me wonder, what does it truly mean to be rich? Who really possesses more? The man with his gleaming car and his robust bank account, or the child with his cardboard box and his boundless imagination? Don't rush to answer. Let the question breathe within you. We live in a world obsessed with accumulation. We collect money, properties, titles, recognition, experiences, even spiritual knowledge. Everything is stacked up in mental warehouses, as if our happiness depended on the size of our inventory. And society tells us, get more, be more, achieve more. That's the melody that plays endlessly in our ears from the moment we're born. It's the lullaby that soothes us to sleep, and the anthem that drives us through life. But observe with me, if you will. Observe without judgment, just look. Has this endless pursuit of more brought us peace? Has it brought us contentment? Or has it merely given us more things to protect, more things to fear losing, more things that bind us like golden chains? Material wealth in itself is not the problem. Let me be clear. I'm not here preaching poverty as a virtue. There is nothing noble about going hungry, being homeless, or suffering needless deprivation. That would just be another form of violence, this time against ourselves. Money is necessary. You need it to eat, to live, to care for your children. That's obvious, isn't it? The problem isn't in the things themselves, but in our relationship with them, in the psychological dependence we create, in the meaning we attach to them. We turn objects into gods and then become slaves to those very gods we created. Look at a man who works 60, 70 hours a week, sacrificing his health, his time with loved ones, his very soul. Why? To buy a bigger house, a newer car, to impress people he doesn't even truly like. And he calls that success. He calls it ambition. But look closer, look deeper. Isn't that man a prisoner? Isn't he living in a cell whose walls are built from his own choices? And the most tragic part is that he believes he's free. He believes he's building something. But what is he really building? Perhaps a more comfortable prison, but a prison nonetheless. Inner wealth. That is something entirely different. And when I use that phrase, I'm not talking about some mystical treasure hidden in a spiritual dimension. I'm not selling a new commodity called spirituality. Inner wealth is not something you accumulate like coins in a vault. It cannot be measured, displayed, lost, or stolen. Inner wealth is freedom from psychological dependence. It is the ability to feel complete without needing external validation. It is the peace that arises when you are no longer perpetually comparing, envying, competing. It is having an inner space that isn't constantly invaded by desires, fears, and ambitions. Imagine a tranquil pond, perfectly still. When its surface is calm, it reflects the sky, the trees, reality exactly as it is. But throw in a stone, desire, fear, ambition, and the surface ripples. The reflection becomes distorted. You no longer see clearly. You see only fragments, broken images, distortions. Our mind is like that pond. When it is still, it perceives life with extraordinary clarity. But we are constantly throwing stones into it, wanting this, fearing that, chasing one thing, running from another, and then we wonder why we feel confused, anxious, lost. Inner wealth begins with understanding this restlessness, not by suppressing it, not by saying, I must not desire, I must not be ambitious. That's just another form of violence, an internal conflict. Freedom comes through pure observation of what is. Look, when you notice a desire arise, say, the desire for a bigger house or a more luxurious car, what do you usually do? You either suppress that desire because you've been taught that wanting is wrong or unspiritual, or you immediately begin planning how to satisfy it. In both cases, you're not truly observing the desire, you're reacting to it. But what if you simply observed it? Without judgment, without choosing, without saying, this is good or this is bad. What happens when you watch a desire with the same attention you would give to a cloud passing across the sky? You don't try to hold on to the cloud, nor do you try to push it away. You simply watch. In that pure observation, something extraordinary happens. The desire reveals its true nature. You begin to see that behind the wish for a bigger house, there isn't really a need for more space, but perhaps a fear of not being enough, a longing to impress, a constant comparison with your neighbors. And when you see this clearly, without illusion, the desire begins to lose its grip on you. Not because you've suppressed it, but because you've understood its root. And what is deeply understood dissolves naturally. That is inner wealth. It's not accumulation, but liberation. Not gaining more, but carrying less. It is like a man who has carried a heavy backpack for years and suddenly realizes he can simply set it down. Freedom doesn't come from adding something new, but from letting go of what's unnecessary. Let me tell you about something I once witnessed. I met a very wealthy man. He owned factories, properties, considerable influence. He would occasionally attend my talks, and one day he came to see me privately. I have everything, he said, yet I feel empty. Every morning I wake up with this sense that something's missing. So I work harder, earn more, buy more, but the emptiness remains. In fact, it grows. Do you understand what he was saying? He had mistaken the hunger of his soul for material hunger. He was trying to fill a psychological, spiritual emptiness with physical things. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking sand. And this isn't just his problem. It's the problem of our entire civilization. We've built a culture that tells us the solution to any inner emptiness is external consumption. Feeling insecure? Buy expensive clothes. Feeling inadequate? Get a degree, a title, an award. Feeling lonely? Accumulate followers, connections, social networks, but the emptiness remains. Because we're treating the symptom, not the cause. The cause lies in the fragmentation of our consciousness. We are divided. There's the I that seeks security, the I that craves pleasure, the I that longs for recognition, the I that fears death. All these fragments competing and contradicting one another, creating constant conflict. And so we try to resolve this inner conflict through external means. We think, if I get that promotion, I'll feel secure. If I buy that house, I'll feel fulfilled. If I'm recognized, I'll feel worthy. But all these external achievements are temporary. The feeling of fulfillment lasts a few days, maybe weeks, and then the emptiness returns, and the chase begins again. It's a hamster wheel. You run and run and run, but you never get anywhere. Inner wealth arises when this fragmentation ends, when there is a deep understanding that you are not these fragments, not the anxious me, nor the ambitious me, nor the fearful me. These are merely conditioned patterns, programmed responses shaped by society, culture, family. When there is clear observation of these patterns, without identification, something fundamental changes. An inner space appears, one that doesn't depend on external circumstances. A stillness untouched by the movement of life. A completeness that requires no validation. This doesn't mean you become apathetic or indifferent, quite the opposite. When you're no longer desperately trying to fill an inner void, you can live with far more energy, far more love, far more creativity. Because that energy is no longer being drained by endless pursuit, constant anxiety, and the perpetual fear of losing what you've gained. Imagine a tree. It doesn't struggle to be a tree. It isn't anxious about whether it's tree enough. It doesn't compare its leaves to those of the tree next to it. It simply grows, naturally, unfolding according to its own nature. And yet, look how magnificent it is. How full of life. We human beings have lost that naturalness. We've lost the ability to simply be. We are always becoming rich, becoming successful, becoming enlightened, always in the future, never in the now. And in this constant state of becoming, we lose the present moment, the only reality that truly exists. Material wealth always promises something in the future. When I have this, I'll be happy. When I achieve that, I'll be at peace. But that future never really arrives, does it? Because as soon as you reach one goal, the mind immediately creates another. The horizon keeps receding as you move toward it. Inner wealth doesn't exist in the future. It's available now, in this very moment. But it requires something our conditioned mind finds very difficult: to stop. To simply stop the endless search. To stop the mental chatter, to stop running away from what is through fantasies of what could be. Have you noticed how rarely you are truly present? While eating, you're thinking about work. While working, you're thinking about the weekend. While with your family, your mind is wandering through 1,000 different places. You are physically here, but psychologically everywhere else. And then you wonder why life feels empty, why relationships feel shallow, why nothing seems satisfying. It's because you are never fully present to experience anything completely. Total presence is a form of wealth no amount of money can buy. When you eat a meal with full attention, feeling the flavor, the texture, the aroma, isn't that extraordinarily rich? When you look at a tree, not with the hurried eyes of someone rushing from one place to another, but truly see the tree in all its complexity, beauty, vitality, isn't that a kind of abundance? But our minds have been trained to devalue the simple. We've been conditioned to believe that the extraordinary is always somewhere else, in something we don't yet have, in some exotic experience we haven't yet lived. We've completely lost the ability to see the miracle in the ordinary. There's a story I like to tell. A man spent his entire life searching for a precious treasure. He read every map, followed every clue, traveled to distant lands, and spent his whole fortune on the quest. And on his deathbed, exhausted and disillusioned, he dug up the ground of his own house for one last attempt. And there, buried beneath the floorboards he had walked on every day of his life, was the treasure he had been searching for. Do you see? What we seek is already here. The peace we long for, the wholeness we desire, they aren't in the future nor in some external achievement. They are in the deep understanding of what is, right now, in this very moment. But conditioning runs deep. Society constantly bombards us with messages reinforcing the belief that we are inadequate as we are, that we need more to be complete. The entire machinery of modern civilization is built on creating dissatisfaction, creating desire, creating the feeling that something is missing, and we buy into this story, quite literally. We buy products, we buy experiences, we buy identities. We come to believe that we are what we own, what we achieve, what others think of us. But tell me, when you strip away all those layers of the possessions, the titles, the accomplishments, the reputation, who are you? Have you ever asked that question seriously? Not philosophically, not intellectually, but truly asked it, going deep within yourself. That question, asked with total sincerity, is the beginning of real inquiry. And through that inquiry, you may discover something extraordinary. That behind all the layers of conditioning, behind all the roles you play, there is a simple, clear awareness without any particular identity, and that awareness needs nothing to be complete. It is neither rich nor poor, neither successful nor a failure. It simply is. And when there is contact with that simple being, something transforms. Material things don't become meaningless, but they lose their power over you. You may have or not have, and both are fine. You may be recognized or ignored, and there is equanimity. You may succeed or fail, and there is peace beneath both. That is real freedom. Not the freedom to have everything you want, but the freedom from being enslaved by your wants. Not the freedom to control life, but the freedom to flow with it without constant resistance. Look at a person who has found this inner wealth. They are not constantly comparing, not perpetually anxious, not desperately trying to prove their worth. There is a natural dignity, a grace, an ease in their way of being. They may be poor in material terms or rich. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they are not at war with life, nor at war with themselves. And such a person radiates something. You must have met people like this, not necessarily famous or recognized, perhaps someone very simple, a gardener, a teacher, an ordinary person. Yet there's a quality in their presence that is unmistakable. You feel peaceful around them. You feel seen, heard, understood. Why? Because they're not projecting their own anxieties, ambitions, and fears onto you. There's space within them, and that space allows you to breathe as well. Now compare that to someone who possesses great material wealth but is psychologically poor. Such a person is always defensive, always trying to impress, always concerned with status, reputation, position. Even in moments of leisure, there's no real relaxation. The mind is constantly calculating, planning, worrying. You can almost feel the tension radiating from them like invisible waves. Who do you think is truly rich? The tragedy of our age is that we have completely reversed our priorities. We devote the vast majority of our energy, our time, our attention to external accumulation, and almost none to inner understanding. We spend years studying to earn degrees, working to build careers, planning to ensure financial security, all of which are important. I don't deny that. But how much time do we actually spend understanding ourselves? Understanding how our mind works, why we react the way we do, what the roots of our fears and desires really are? We are strangers to ourselves. We live entire lives without ever truly knowing who we are, and then we wonder why there is so much confusion, so much suffering, so much conflict. Self-knowledge is not narcissism. It's not being obsessed with yourself. It's exactly the opposite. When you know yourself deeply, not your ideas about yourself, but the actual movements of your psyche, illusion ends. And when illusion ends, there is clarity. And from that clarity arises right action, genuine relationship, authentic living. But that takes time. It takes patience. It requires a willingness to look at yourself without flinching, without hiding behind comforting explanations or elaborate justifications. Our culture doesn't teach us this. Our culture teaches us to look outward, always outward. The solution is always out there, in the next product, the next experience, the next guru, the next system. Never here, never now, never within ourselves. And so we continue the external search, generation after generation, accumulating more and more outwardly while remaining inwardly impoverished, fragmented, confused. You know, people often come to me and say, "Tell me what to do to find this inner wealth you speak of. Give me a method, a practice, a system." And I say, there is no method, because any method implies time. It implies a practitioner and something to be practiced. It implies the continuation of the division between the observer and the observed. Inner wealth is not the result of a practice. It is what remains when all practice ceases, when all seeking ends, when there is only pure observation of what is. But that seems very difficult for the conditioned mind. The mind wants a path, measurable progress, something it can control. The mind wants to turn even freedom into a project, something to be achieved through effort and time. But freedom doesn't work that way. It isn't in the future. You either see the prison now or you don't. And when you see it clearly, completely, without escape or rationalization, in that very perception lies liberation. It's like being in a dark room for years and suddenly someone turns on the light. You don't need a method to see that the room is illuminated. The perception is immediate, instant. The problem is that we don't really want to see, because seeing would mean the end of many things we find familiar and comfortable. It would mean the end of our favorite ambitions, our carefully constructed self-images, our cherished grievances. So we create complications. We turn something simple into something endlessly complex. We invent elaborate systems, intricate practices, spiritual journeys that take decades, all to avoid the terrifying simplicity of simply seeing what is. And entire industries are built on this avoidance. The self-help industry, much of modern spirituality, all promising that if you buy this book, take this course, follow this guru, you will eventually find what you seek. But don't you see? That's just the same structure of materialism applied to spirituality. It is the same consumer mindset, the same belief that happiness comes from acquiring something external, only now the product is packaged as spiritual growth or personal development. True inner wealth is not a product. It cannot be bought, sold, or transferred. It blossoms naturally when the search ends, not through the acquisition of one more thing, but through the quiet realization that nothing more is needed. Let me be even clearer, because this is fundamental. Inner wealth is not an achievement. It's not something you add to your collection of experiences. It's not like saying, now I have a house, a car, a degree, and inner wealth too. If you treat it that way, it has already become just another possession, another item on the list of things that define who you think you are. Inner wealth is a state of non-accumulation. It is living without the psychological weight of ownership, and that doesn't necessarily mean having no physical possessions. You may have a home, you may have resources, but psychologically you are not attached to them. You don't derive your identity from them. You don't live in constant fear of losing them. There's a vast difference between using something and being attached to it. You use clothes, but you don't have to be psychologically bound to them. You can use a car to get from one place to another, but the car doesn't define your worth as a human being. Yet, observe how we live. The kind of car we drive becomes a statement about who we are. The house we live in becomes our identity. The clothes we wear become our social armor. Everything becomes charged with psychological meaning. And then we spend our lives protecting, maintaining, and improving these things because we feel we are protecting ourselves. If the house is damaged, we feel we are damaged. If someone has a better car, we feel we are less. Do you see the slavery in this? Do you see how we've turned neutral objects into extensions of our psychological self, and how that traps us in an endless cycle of maintenance, anxiety, and comparison? Freedom arises when there is a clear distinction between what is necessary for living and what is a psychological demand. You need food, that's real. You need shelter, that's real. But do you need a luxury car to prove your worth? Do you need a house that impresses your neighbors? Do you need designer clothes to feel adequate? When this distinction becomes clear, not through ideology or morality, but through direct observation, something changes fundamentally. You may still choose to have those things, but your relationship with them is completely different. There is no longer psychological dependency. And know this, where there is no dependency, there is abundance. It may sound paradoxical, but look closely. When you are not psychologically clinging, when there is no fear of loss, there is no sense of scarcity. You may have little materially, yet possess a richness of spirit that no bank account could ever provide. I have met people living in great material simplicity, not out of ideology, not because someone told them poverty is virtuous, but simply because they saw clearly that their real needs are modest. And these people carried a lightness, a joy, a generosity of spirit that was remarkable. They could give freely because they did not feel they were losing anything by giving. They could share because there was no sense of lack. Compare that with those who have much, yet live in constant fear of not having enough. It is never enough, no matter how much they accumulate. There is always someone with more, always a new threat to security, always a new reason to worry. That is real poverty, not the lack of money, but the lack of inner peace. It is living in a perpetual state of psychological insecurity, no matter how much you possess outwardly. So, what is to be done? How can one live in this world that constantly pushes us toward material accumulation and still maintain inner clarity? First, you cannot live this clarity as an idea. If you simply adopt the belief that inner wealth is more important than material wealth, you've only created another ideology, another belief system to protect. And then there will be conflict between what you believe and what you actually feel when you see someone who has more than you do. Clarity must be lived, not believed. And it arises from constant observation, moment to moment, of how the mind operates. Observe when envy arises. Do not suppress it, do not justify it, just see it. Observe when there is the impulse to impress someone. See it clearly, in all its ugliness. In that observation, without condemnation, there is learning, and what is truly learned, not merely understood intellectually, transforms you. You don't need to try to change. The change happens naturally as a consequence of clear perception. It's like when you see that something is poisonous, you don't need discipline to avoid it. You simply don't touch it. The perception of danger is enough. In the same way, when you see clearly how psychological attachment to material things creates suffering, there is no longer attraction to that path, not because you should avoid it, but because you've seen its nature. Then you can live in this world, have a job, earn money, even enjoy material success, but all of it happens without psychological burden. It's as if you're playing a game, but you don't forget that it's just a game. You play fully, with complete attention, but you're not destroyed if you lose, nor inflated if you win. There's a lightness in that, a joy that doesn't depend on outcomes, a creativity that flows freely because it isn't bound by the fear of failure.